want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
We are the Mad Men of Masculinity.
Your home for healthy masculinity. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
Oh yeah. It's
What?
that time again, folks. What? Oh,
What?
you weren't listening. You weren't listening to me,
What?
huh?
What?
What happened?
Hey, I am Kirk M. Samuels,
And I am Jason B. Kendrick.
and we are the Mad Men of Masculinity.
That's right. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
For you. That's what we do this.
And
That's what
tonight
we
we're
do this
talking
thing.
about our men listening. Do we listen?
Yeah.
Huh?
This is our bonus session here for the week.
What?
Of course, we're on 1220 AM in the Miles City, KLDC. We're on the interwebs everywhere and all that kind of stuff. We record our over-the-air radio show, for an hour, and then we stream that, and then we just come in with a little bonus session. Just a little bonus sesh. Here in the week.
Yeah, it's for all of our ADD kids who can't do an hour.
Right. Can't pay attention for an hour. So we decided let's talk about something for a little bit shorter period of time. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good thing.
So where did you hear this from?
Well, it was interesting because I'm constantly doing research, constantly watching videos, TikToks, YouTube, all these different things. And there was a lady, I don't know if it was Steve Harvey, it was one of those TV shows where she's like, I got a great husband. We've been married 10 years and he's awesome and this and that. But, sometimes I just wish he would just get it. I wish he would just, I wouldn't have to ask him to do things. I wouldn't have to tell him to do things. And whoever the panelist was like, well, a man normally hears about 25% of the things you do say. He hears 0% of the things you don't say. And he might understand 5% of the things you do say. So if you're not saying things and you just want him to get it, you might be barking up the wrong tree. And so are men listening? Yeah, I think we're listening. I think the issue tends to be a lot of times that men's brains work different, women's brains work different. And so even though we're listening, we may not quite get all the nuance that the ladies are telling us.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not telepathic. We're not. What's the other word? It is another word. I don't know, man. We're not just people that pick up stuff out of the air kind of thing, especially amongst communications. Clairvoyant. That's the word I'm looking for. We're not that. And so, especially in the context of a relationship, man, you got to be able to talk. You got to be able to communicate. Men, I think, are pretty direct. And I think, men, they get it. The light switch is either on or off. They're either paying attention or they're not. And when it comes to some stuff, man, you got to communicate. I mean, you got to communicate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've been told all our lives, we got to listen to our ladies and stuff. And it's hard for men a lot of times because we just don't do the details. We don't have a lot of the emotional details. We don't have a lot of the minutia that ladies do where they talk about every little detail, which I know is always shocking for most guys when they find out how detailed their girls get with their girlfriends and family and things. And you're like, you said what to who about what? But for guys, it's like, yeah, so-and-so's getting married or so-and-so's getting a divorce. Well, why? What? Who? How? Well, that's just what he told me. So I said, okay.
Yeah.
That's how we work.
Yeah, we're definitely not digging into extra details and stuff like that. When it comes into the the art of relationship, I think I think to a degree, us as men should study. We should study the person in our life. We should study the woman in our life, and we should be paid attention. It's not too far of a stretch to know kind of what's coming next. If she likes a pot of coffee when she wakes up, okay, well, I mean, it's not too far of a stretch to know that she's going to wake up and say, well, maybe I'll have a pot of coffee for her, as often as possible, stuff like that. I mean, so I think we might have some, there might be some opportunity in there to make space for she's in that space. But in terms of communication, in terms of just us getting what you thinking and feeling and all that kind of mess, man, ain't nobody, I mean, come on, that ain't even realistic, man.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what tends to happen is, especially when we're new in relationships or just maybe just getting married or whatever, you don't want to mess it up. Like, okay, I got my person, I don't want to mess it up, so we don't address things when they're small. And I love the story because it just illustrates it so much to the point that there was a couple and this lady, they've been married 30, 40 years, and she was always upset that her husband kept making her sandwiches with the heels of the bread. And for all these years, she never said nothing, never asked a question. And then finally, at some point, she just gets irritated. She's like, "Why do you always give me the worst part of the loaf of bread, the worst bread?" He's like, "The worst bread?" He thought that the heels were the best bread, so he's been making her sandwiches what he thought was the best. But she never asked a question, so she didn't know he was coming from a place of love. And I think a lot of times it boils down to little things like that where we want to listen, but sometimes we have to realize that we communicate in different ways. So, ladies, being a little more direct to your men will be very helpful, and guys asking more questions. Because when guys are talking to guys, like, "Hey, what's going on?" "Fine." We're like, "Okay, you're fine. Cool."
Mhm.
But, that's a nuanced, answer to a lot of ladies, because most ladies will know when her friend says fine or, her lady friend says fine, then that's not really fine. That's a invitation to dig deeper. Whereas we guys are a little more logical linear. We just go, okay. And then we're in
Yeah.
trouble. We didn't know we got in trouble. We didn't know why.
Guys tend to be pretty direct into communication stuff, like especially how we're feeling or the status. So we're status kind of people. We create consoles and dashboards and all that kind of stuff. And it's like if I'm good, I'm good. If I'm not, the shine, turn on a light. I mean, if I'm not, okay, flash a light at me, telling me my tire pressure is low, or telling me check engine or whatever it is. I mean, we a man invented a check engine light. I mean, and he did it for a reason. He did it because it's like, all right, let me know when something needs to be looked at, and he's pretty direct in that. So men are direct in that kind of way, man. And I think if you communicate, speaking, to ladies specifically, but if you're communicating with men, you gotta be able to receive the status, the check engine light, and you got to be able to communicate that check engine light in terms of successful communication with a man. But without that kind of thing, we don't necessarily catch it.
Yeah. And I mean, in most guys, we appreciate a little bit of directness. And what I hear a lot from ladies is like, well, it just seems rude, or I just wish he would just get it. Well, I mean, we want to get it, but it's something you got to speak our language. And for the guys, we have to be the investigator. We have to be the reporter and try to figure these things out because it takes years. It takes years upon years to get to that point where you're so connected with somebody and so comfortable with somebody. And you've been through enough where you get those little nuanced communications. The look of the eye or the shoulder shrug or whatever. Where you're like, oh, okay, I got that. But initially, it's about being willing to dig into that minutia and talk about it and explain it. I think a lot of times we are so afraid to talk about those things because we think that's somehow going to ruin the relationship, but really that's what makes it better because it's just about learning each other and our communication styles. Like some guys, we make weird noises, and then girl might be like, I don't know what that means. Huh? Okay, guys have their noises, guys have their things. So if it comes down to you want to be in a relationship and a successful relationship, communication is key, but it takes time to actually kind of fight through and be reporters and investigators of each other and figure out how the other one communicates. And it is very helpful when you find out your partner's personality style and their communication style, their love languages, things like that, because it helps in all those arenas. It helps you go, okay, that's how they receive love, that's how they give love, that's kind of their personality style, so this is their basis of how they communicate. It will help you a lot.
Yeah. If you think that men aren't good at communicating, then you should watch sports. I mean, first of all, and a lot of that comes from a man being engaged in what he's doing. That's why we start off, we before we get married, we get engaged. I mean, the whole point is to be engaged with that thing. And so, when we play golf, right? When you get close, when you get up on the green, you're supposed to anyway take time. You study the green, you study the course, right at the tee box they tell you how far it is. They give you a little map, dog leg left, dog leg right, there's a sand trap. Okay, so I know where I'm aiming, where I'm hitting, and all that kind of stuff. If you watch baseball, there's a lot of communication going on. You got one guy on the side doing this, all that kind of stuff, and then that means something to that guy. Then you got the pitcher, he's looking into the catcher, and the catcher's like giving him, the split, or giving him whatever hand signals, and the pitcher's like no, yes, all that kind of stuff. Have you ever heard a football play called in to a quarterback? I mean, in the headset of the quarterback, X spider, Y right, 30 zigzag, 22X, Omaha, all that kind. I mean, all of that stuff means something. All of that stuff has some meaning in what this next thing we're about to do. And within that, like football players study their playbook, and a playbook could have like 700 plays. Well, it's not 700, it's several with a bunch of different nuances. It's like, I'm gonna call this play, but if they're playing this defense, then this play means this, and blah 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 blah. And so so men communicate well, but it's direct. So when the coach calls in that play, over the headset to the quarterback, the quarterback knows, okay, in translation, the quarterback, lets the other guys know what we're about to do. And then the other guys go take your position. And then, when the ball is put in play, when I say hike, then you know what you're supposed to do. And so men are great at communicating, which is really direct. It starts with us being engaged, but then it also starts with us kind of knowing what it is that we're doing and being involved in what we're doing. But men are great at communicating. It's just how we communicate might be different than what women would like or what women would expect.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the trouble comes in, or a lot of the kind of bad feelings, or maybe what we see a lot of times. Well, I want him to communicate this way. I want him to tell me his feelings. I want him to give me all the details and things. And that's just not how we're wired. We don't do those things. And also, that's why a lot of times when we do engage with you and, with our ladies, and we want her to vent and tell her stories, and she goes into all the details, and we kind of get glazed eyes and a little glassy. We're like, because that's not our brains, they're not wired all together. We live in little boxes, and so having all those little details is like, well, that detail goes in this box, and that detail goes in that box, and this goes over here. It's not all connected. So a lot of times we're just trying to keep up, we're trying to listen, but we don't have that interconnected mindset like a lot of ladies do, where it just makes sense. Well, okay, I see how that goes this way, I see how that's connected to this and this and that. And so a lot of times we're just lost in the forest for the trees, going, I'm trying to follow along, but I don't know where we went there. Like, we took a fork in the woods, and now I'm lost.
Yeah, you can't expect a guy to communicate the way you want him to communicate it if you're a lady. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, you can't go into a foreign country and expect them to understand your language just because that's your language. You got to learn how to speak that language in order to communicate with the people who are of that land in their language. And so when you're working with and communicating with a man, absolutely do I believe that it's incumbent upon men in the context of relationship to also do their best to understand their lady and understand their woman, and to work on different types of communication and all those kinds of things. But in terms of understanding your man and why don't he just know? Well, what do you mean, why doesn't he just know? Women don't even know. Like, it ain't like women read each other's minds. I mean, if you talk to a woman or interact, be in a room full of women, they get frustrated at each other too, because they don't always know what each other's thinking. If you see a mom and a teenage daughter living in the same house, you would think that a mom was never a teenage daughter. Because with me and my son, it's like, yeah, I remember when I was that age and I was exactly like this and that. But if you see a mom and a teenage daughter, it's like the mom is so just perplexed at how chaotic her daughter is and how cray her daughter is and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, wasn't you that age at one point? Like, didn't you get it? Like, if I can see it, why can't you see it? And you've been there already. So, I mean, it's not like, men are so far out of the box in terms of just understanding and just getting it, because women have troubles with that too.
Yeah, and one of the things, I mean, when you get into personal development work, especially if you do any couples counseling, or if you're getting in a relationship, I really highly suggest couples counseling or some sort of intermediary to help you learn to communicate better. But just learning about the other personality types. I mean, not only are we talking about men and women differences, but then there's different personality types within that. So some personality types are more task oriented, some are more relationship oriented, some are more about what you get done today, and some are like, well, how are you feeling today? So there's just different ways and different keys and words they key in on, things that they're just kind of wired to pay attention to and be focused on. And so knowing that about your partner really helps, so that that you may be speaking two different languages, even though you're using the same English words, but you're getting different things. And I always find that's funny, that you can be saying the same words, but speaking sometimes is the most or is the least effective communication tool, because every word means something different to somebody else by their past experiences and how they grew up and what their social, cultural, economic background was. And so it may, what you're saying makes sense to you, but then the other person is hearing it a different way. That's why I say when you're in relationship and things are getting a little rough, it's like having questions like, what did you hear me say? Or saying what I heard you say was, and then realizing you guys aren't really communicating as well as you think, because you're saying what you think it is and they're hearing what they think it is, and it's two different things. And so being able to kind of take the emotions off the table, take the feelings out of it, and just be a student of each other and going, okay, well, what did you mean by that? Because that word means this to me. That's why I got upset. Or that means this to me, where that's not what that means to me. That means something totally different. And so I'm attempting to express myself in a clear, concise way, but how you're taking it sometimes will come across differently. So having those conversations, because a lot of times, I mean, I've had several of those where I'll make a joke or say something, then they're giving me the side eye. And I'm like, well, okay, wait, what did you hear me say? Well, you said that. I'm like, that's not what I said. And that definitely wasn't my intention. You just took it that way. So I think a lot of times we allow the emotions and the feelings and our own internal dialogue to take over with what's actually going on, which is an attempt to connect. And if you want to connect, sometimes you got to go, hey, what do you mean by that? Or I didn't hear that correctly, because that's obviously not what you meant. And then ask those questions, have those conversations.
Man, that happens a whole lot in terms of, in some kind of discussion, especially if it's a heated discussion or a discussion with emotion or something like that. It's a discussion with feelings involved where, literally there'll be two totally different translations of what was just you said that I did not, those words never came out of my mouth. That's exactly what you said. Those words exactly what you just said. Blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna repeat word for word what you just said. And you're like, I didn't say that. And so, man, being able to communicate with not only how the other person communicates, but then also being able to, but also being able to go back and to agree on what was said. What was said may not have been the words that you used, or the word that you used might have triggered me in some kind of way that one word means like a whole thing over here. Well, that one word means a whole nother thing over here. So, okay. So let's just come together and let's agree on a word that is safe for both of us to use that will trigger neither one of us or something along those lines. But either way, you got to work on not only, how you communicate, but also what you communicate specifically. And it may come down to being as simple as the words that you use that may or may not trigger somebody. But all of these things go into, how we go back and forward with the whole process of communicating. But men are great at communicating. I mean, men, if I think of the best orators, the best speeches, throughout history, off the top of my head, most of them are men giving speeches. I mean, think about it, American history. Most of the most profound speeches that are quoted were men. Men are great at communicating. Most big time speakers are men. Most the highest the highest tier of motivational speakers. I mean, you name it. I mean, are men. So point is, men are great at communicating. And so we can't pretend that there's something wrong with men if they're just not getting it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest issue, is that we tend to communicate with the opposite sex like we communicate with each other. So, like, if a man's communicating with a man, it's completely different than when a man's communicating with a woman. But we're still wired that way, so we can communicate very directly, and so we get in trouble a lot when we communicate very directly. It's taken in a way that's, oh well, that's harsh because it was too direct, and then
Mhm.
a lot of ladies speak in this kind of nuanced fashion. But we know ladies can speak direct, because when they want you to do something or they're mad at you and they know they're right, they'll stay on point and they'll be like, "No, don't try to go over there. Stay right here. We're going to talk about this." So we know you ladies can be direct. So we're just saying, let's work together when it comes to communication, especially in relationships. And yes, men are listening. We are listening. We just may not be hearing everything you say the way you mean it, because we're not wired that way. And so to that guy's point on that show, men hear probably about 25% of what you ladies say, maybe understand about 5% of it, but we hear 0% of what you don't say. So all of this, I wish he would just get it and read my mind and just know. Well, if you've been with that guy for 30 or 40 years, probably he will. But to get that point, you got to go through this whole process of learning how each other communicates, all of our buzzwords, our safe words, our don't use that word, or this triggers me. You have to go through that maze of finding out, okay, well, this is how my partner communicates, and this is their background, and these are the words I should use, these words I shouldn't use, and understand those different things. And then you'll start to get to that place. But it's not like you're going to find somebody just right off the street and go, oh, he just gets everything. Well, he's either telepathic, or you got a sign on your forehead that's just like a ticker tape saying, do this, do that. I like this. I don't like that. Most of us have to kind of work through the minutia to get to that point.
Now, what you don't want to do is you don't necessarily want to flood him with a bunch of words. Generally speaking, women use more words than men, right? And so the advice is not to keep telling them over and over again, or keep describing it over and over again, or keep using every word that you have in your vocabulary until he gets it. Sometimes it's better to cut your losses and to stop trying to explain it, to stop trying to convince him, to stop nagging him, to stop all those kinds of things, and just give it a minute, give him time to breathe. Maybe all right, let's take a break. Like, let's just stalemate. Let's take a break. I think we even talked about this with Alex a few weeks ago, but let's just take a break. I mean, I'm not talking about take a break relationship wise, but obviously we've reached a stalemate in this conversation. Let's come back to this in an hour. Let's go whatever. Let's go for a walk, or I'm gonna go for a walk, or let's go cuddle, or let's go have some great sex, or whatever your thing is in your relationship, or let's just go do nothing. You go to your corner, I go to my corner, and we'll come back and we'll circle back later on this evening, or tomorrow, or you set a time, or whatever it is. But the advice is definitely not to just keep flooding words over and over and over and over again, because that may not be the right choice.
Yeah, a lot of times I know for guys, especially when we want to understand, when we are listening and we don't get it, it can trigger some of our own pride and some of our own insecurities on the inside. 'Cause we're like, I know she's using words I should understand, but I'm not getting the whole story. And so sometimes when we shut down or get quiet is we're attempting to process. So when you keep bombarding us and keep trying to pound it in there, it's like that channel is already full. So you just, there's no more getting through there. He's got to process that. So having those times and being able to have that in a relationship where you're like, okay, we're no longer communicating effectively, and having a timeout, having a safe word like, all right, spinach, it's time for us to take a break. We got to go to our neutral corners, because once the emotions get up and you're no longer thinking coherently, you go out of your, frontal cortex back to the, hippocampus, and you're back into the reptilian brain. You're like, this is fight or flight now. We're not really communicating. So we need to take a break and resettle ourselves and get regrounded and all that stuff, so we can get back to actually the frontal cortex in the front of our brain, where we're conscious beings, and not just lizards running around trying to kill each other.
I like the idea of having a safe word.
Mine's mango-licious.
When you go on at it, it's like meatloaf. That's it. I'm done. I need a break. Like, this is becoming a little, meatloaf. But yeah, I mean, I think all of those are just good advice. But the point is to I'll bring my plane in for a landing. I think men are great communicators. I think it might look different than women. I think generally speaking, it's more direct. It's more just succinct. It is what it is, and then move on. And that's about it. You don't necessarily talk to resolution all the time. Sometimes you say what you got to say, and then the resolution comes after the fact. But I think men are great communicators. If your man is not a good communicator, then I think that might come down to maybe some technique, maybe some skills, some strategies, or something like that you all need to develop between the two of you. But I think men are great communicators. We can't read minds, but I think when things are pretty direct and straightforward, and generally speaking, without emotion, we are pretty good with being able to receive and to give communication.
Now, on the other hand, men can be great listeners, and a lot of times we are great listeners, but we listen to the things that we're wired for. We listen to directness. We listen to the things that we understand. And so it may take time to get him to be able to understand all your nuances. And for you guys, learning to listen without fixing, learning to listen and be present without having to even have an answer or even comment. I mean, a lot of times some of the best quote unquote communicators is somebody who just sits there and nods their head at the right time, gives a little and okay, yeah, contributes nothing to the conversation other than presence and two ears. So this is something for you guys to practice. Like, all right, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to fix everything. And if you can just learn to just be present and allow her to be as detailed and crazy and whatnot as she needs to be to get that out, because women vent to release. And a lot of times we as guys, we do too as well, but we do a lot more physical releasing. You know, we go for walks, we go for hikes, we go for silent time, we go hit the gym or whatever. So it's just a different way that we kind of vent those stresses. And so being a guy, learning to be able to be present and listen without interjecting or without having to have a solution to every problem will go a long way in your relationship. Because a lot of times for guys, we process a lot of times by doing or by making charts or lists or things like that. A lot of times, ladies, they process through the talking. So they're not actually asking for your advice or not actually asking for your solutions. They're just wanting to get it out so they can, that's how they're processing it. Guys, we're different. We tend to process internally. Women tend to process externally. Of course, this is a generality, so don't be getting in the comments like, I don't, I'm a woman, I process internally. Okay, I get it. You're on the fringe, you're the smaller percentage, but the majority, that's where following these categories. That's kind of how we process. So guys learning how to do that, you know, and maybe when you learn how to do that, then she'll start learning to communicate with you in a way that is more direct and more in your fashion so you can understand better. Because we all want, the whole point is we want to understand each other better. I mean, we're gonna do this life together and create this relationship together, maybe do a family together. We need to understand each other. So in the beginning, it could be a rough road, but if you stick with it and ask questions and be open and curious and be present, it might be magic later on.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, hey, Mad Men of Masculinity, check us out, madmenradio.com, KLDC 1220 AM in the Mile High City. You can, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can do that, YouTube, Facebook. And, you know, don't be a chump. Don't be a sucker. Hit subscribe. Like, for real, it don't cost you nothing. It don't, I mean, but it helps us out. You know, it helps get on. We got some, you know, pretty good numbers coming in consistently. Consistency is really on our side. And so help us out. All you got to do is hit like, hit subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. And holler at your boys, you know, let us know what you think. Any thoughts, any ideas, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And make sure when you make comments, whether you love us or hate us, do at least 4 words. That's good for the algorithms. And for those of you that don't know, we don't just do this. Kirk and I both coach. We both do men's groups and different things. And so if you are looking to have some support, if you're looking to have somebody to work with you one-on-one, or maybe even have us come talk in a group, we do a lot of panel discussions. And I think we're going out to a whole weekend seminar to be a part of a panel in the summer. So we're available for you guys to use. So, I mean, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you liking and subscribing and leaving nice comments or evil comments. Doesn't matter. Just leave comments. We like all the comments, but use us. We're here to be of service. We just did the service episode not too long ago. So let us be of service for you and let us help you. And we got our websites right here. You can find us. You can find out what we offer individually and as a, you know, team right here. So we're here for you and we are listening. I can't hear you though.
What? And with that,
Mad Men out.